Okay, that's pretty much all of APAC out of the way. So Group B now. We're looking at the jerseys of the teams within Group B. Let's have a look what we've got up first. It's the Sonics. Okay. Very classic style, logo and the sponsors. Black is the predominant color in the background. This time it's the same kind of strip that you had down the middle of the day trade logo, but with a little bit less sort of geometry added into it. No points towards it, just hard cut lines. No separating strip down the middle to make it into almost twin stripes, just one single solid one with a slight change of the color towards the center. And of course, they're making use of that iconic sort of teal color scheme that they have. That's about all there is to it, to be honest. Get a bit of a better view with the front on image, but it's again, it's very basic, quite understated. They haven't tried to do anything overly fancy, and I think in a way that can be a good thing. Just the little strips of pale blue around the sleeves and down the center gives it that little hint of color, but without being too overly garish. But it's also not being overly brave or exciting. I like the addition of the stars as well, representing their regional and international titles. Slight bit of a flex on that front that they're able to do, but I think overall the jersey design, it would be hard to give this anything other than kind of straight down the middle. It's not terrible, but it's not outstanding. It's decent. All right, Petrichor Road is another one that's quite difficult to get a proper look at. There just isn't that much out there of images of them wearing this. Tried to take some screenshots of when Ike's Left was being interviewed, but honestly not good. But what we can see is actually a very slight deviation from the standard sort of stock package. This time we have the team logo on the right hand side and the Chinese flag on the left. Ooh, mixing it up now. I do like the colors. Again, that sort of paler blue goes well with the dark background that they have. Black being the standard, of course. And unfortunately, I'm not really able to find a wider image of the patterns towards the bottom, but the sleeves on the side having sort of different patterns between themselves. The one on the left sleeve looking almost like bubbling waves of water. The one on the right looking something like a dragon scales. Yeah, I do think that's quite sick. It's quite a sick design. It's a little bit too busy, I think, with 3 separate patterns going on in a lot of places. One on either sleeve and one sort of down from the bottom, all kind of different. Doesn't feel like there's too much cohesion across it. But all in all, I think the piece comes together in a way that's, yeah, nice enough to wear. Weibo Gaming now, and it doesn't get any more stock standard than this. We've got the white background, the logo approximately where it should be, sponsor across the middle, sponsor on the right. And to try and keep things at least a little bit interesting, they've taken some of the colors from the logos and done a kind of outline. Don't mind it across the shoulders and the part around the sleeves, though on the sleeves the stripes are probably a little too thin and a bit far away from the end of the sleeve, so it's a little strange. The part where they lose me is this extra red that comes down the inside. Not a fan of that, but I mean, if it didn't have that, it would basically just be white. So you can tell they've tried to do something a little bit interesting, but it really hasn't paid off. And now that I look at it, having the logo on the right hand side not even being on the same horizontal level as the team logo on the left, a little bit higher for no real reason, makes me think this was either just sort of slapped together swiftly because they only just got signed a few days before the event, or alternatively, it was designed by a blind man. GNL now, and for our Korean representatives in this group, they too have brought something a little basic to the table. Now, the color scheme of the GNL logo has 3 predominant colors. It's the white, the blue, and then the sort of orangey red of the eyeball. They've opted just purely to stick with the blue, which is a kind of dark desaturated, and then they've stuck that against a black background, a little bit of a pattern in it, almost like a brush stroke, and then the classic sleeves and coloring as well. I do like that they've almost incorporated the shape of the logo into the lettering as well. The logo is a circle, and the top of the lettering and where it says GNL across the chest has almost a semicircular shape cut into the top of it. I appreciate that they've tried to keep the front of the jersey as free from clutter as possible, so all of the sponsors haven't just been littered all across the chest, but they're all up by the shoulders and on the sleeves. But I think unfortunately the space that they've made by doing that hasn't been utilized as well as it potentially could have been. It's that subtle gradient brushstroke pattern, but really not too much else. It's not bad, it doesn't look terrible, just not as eye-catching as some of the other colors. There's not so much contrast between the dark blue and the black background and the kind of grays that they've used. Yeah, it's not too bad. It's fine. It's decent. Okay, TSM. Now, when your team's branding is just a solid color and it's either black or white, you are quite limited in your options of what you can do. Or alternatively, you take the approach of just saying, well, since our logo and branding is just black or white, we just go all out and go completely garish colors. But TSM has opted for the former in keeping a sort of monochrome design. But they also know that that doesn't mean that it has to be boring. Just because something's in black or white doesn't mean that you can't find ways to add geometric patterns, make use of the space to make it interesting to look at least. And I think they've done a pretty good job of making that the case. Have almost the inverted gradients that sort of give the impression that it's been sort of chopped and cut into, and the very almost space styled Star Wars type TSM logo across the middle. It's making use of the space that's been left there by the gradient patterns as well. Similar thing to GNL with not cluttering the front with logos, keeping those just towards the sleeves. And one of the few designs that hasn't sort of put any sort of color on against the darker background. I think this one, it works really well, sort of across the board. Feels like almost a mix between a gradient pattern and a checkerboard up towards the top and the bottom as well. Maybe if there's one minor criticism that you could make, it's the fact that the TSM logo could have been placed inside a gradient with a solid black background instead of crossing over the border between two. But I think all in all, this one, it does its job effective, makes good use of the colors available that fit with the branding. Yeah, this is a statement piece from TSM. And now D plus Kia, who's kind of in the same boat as TSM, using just a solid black or white logo respectively. And they've taken a slightly different approach, but it's not too dissimilar in what they're trying to do. Just adding a little bit of an element of color, or at least something interesting, so it's not just purely black and white. D plus logo on the left, using that sort of almost a similar style of text, but this time it is just the Kia logo. As their primary and sole sponsor, it takes up all the space it needs to. Nothing interesting really been done with the sleeves or the collars. They've just kind of left that completely vacant. And the gradient pattern from the bottom, which funnily enough looks a lot like a pair of swimming trunks I bought recently. So yeah, if I had a D plus Kia jersey, it would almost be like a full uniform. And while I don't necessarily dislike it, and to an extent I do like the fact that it's been kept quite clean and almost minimalistic in its design, I think there's an opportunity to take what they were trying to do with the gradient and do something a little more interesting with it, to sort of push it that little bit further. So I'm gonna have to say this one, yeah, a little bit suboptimal. Now we have 4AM. Now they've tried to sprinkle a little bit of color into an otherwise monochrome color scheme as well, with the inclusion of the red color scheme, starting with the trim around the logo itself, one shoulder and about 3/5 of the collar, and then the underarm on the opposite side. Immediately off the bat, it feels a little bit unbalanced, but they've kind of tried to make use of that by putting all of the logos on the sleeve of the side where it's red on the underside alone. So I suppose that salvages a little bit of it, but it still looks a little, it still doesn't look fantastic. The inclusion of the yellow logo on the opposite side for the sponsor kind of takes away from the color scheme that they're going for as well. It's really annoying when a team has a sponsor and the sponsor says, oh no, you have to use our branding colors, and it just doesn't really fit with the shirt itself. As a Tottenham enjoyer who doesn't really love the fact that you have to have red on the home shirts, I can relate to that. But that's not the only problematic logo here, because the Republic of Gamers logo being the same size, if not bigger, as the 4AM logo kind of almost takes away from the team's identity. And then to almost try and compensate for that, they've just put like a giant version of the Spartan down towards the bottom, which in and of itself is a cool design, but it just, I don't know, it doesn't really work here for me. The way that they've tried to spice it up by adding the sort of striped lines across it, a little bit of attempt at negative space, I don't know, it doesn't really work. It feels almost to me like they've had some limitations in their design choices, and they've tried their best to work around it, but it's coming out looking a little bit like it was designed by a blind man. And finally, for Group B, we have probably the single most stock standard design style that you're going to find in any of these teams. The crest on the left side of the chest, a sponsor on the right, a sponsor across the chest, plain black backing, plain white in a lot of places, and then the hints of yellow around the collar, the sleeve, and the logo, and that's it. A little bit of text down towards the bottom as well, where it's almost handwritten, but that's really all there is to the entire jersey. And to be honest, I kind of love it. I think this is like a perfect example of why so many teams copy the style that you have on like classic football shirts, that when it's done well, it looks so damn clean. It looks so damn good. They've gone almost for a V-neck collar as opposed to the crew neck that almost every other team has gone for. But the yellow and the white around that part of the shirt almost comes together in a similar point and a peak to that what you find on the logo. Just the black, yellow, and white, it all just works really well together. Contrast is so high that all the colors pop between one another. I mean, hey, put these boys in anything, they're gonna look good, but put them in these jerseys in particular, and yeah, that is a fashion statement.